How can creativity be enhanced by engaging our audience's intuition? Let us call this the, well, that looks like this enigma. Yes, we are back to second order thinking. We need to consider what our audience interprets to ensure our visual language decisions visually communicates what we intend. In our visual language choices, we can apply semiosis to enhance what we intend is visually communicated to our audience. Let us explore how. Well, I think that looks like this. No matter what we are designing or illustrating, we expect our final outcome will clearly visually communicate what we intended, yes? However, with no criticism of your personal creative skills, your target audience may not see what you see. In this 17th episode of Semiosis 101 Season 4, we semiotically consider where your visual language can use semiosis to avoid miscommunication. We are not talking about creative genius nor ego, neither is helpful. However, we will, over the next 9 minutes, be discussing human-centered design in the context of semiotic sign action. Your own developing semiotic mindset will now begin to synthesize many of this season's epiphanies. What? You have no epiphanies yet? Well, you will if you watch the previous Semiosis 101 episodes after this episode. One of the principal design books I have referenced throughout Season 3 is Klaus Krippendorff's The Semantic Turn. In his book, he makes a comment about audience intuition, which I will rehash. Illustrators and designers always straddle between what can be visually communicated and what can only be felt or intuited by the audience. I like this mental image he uses of straddling as visual communication straddles disciplines. I will now recontextualize his comments through a semiosis lens and focus on how intuition affects your creative aesthetic outcomes. Yes, I do mean your designs and illustrations, but let us not get sidetracked about media choices. Your aesthetic outcomes are not passive. They have a visual communication job to achieve. Your aesthetic hooks and retains audience attention so that the semiotic sign action can facilitate interpretation. This audience interpretation of what they see is enabled through your choice of visual language. This visual language may grammatically structure quite complex levels of visually communicated meaning by representing the client's concept, not denotatively but connotatively. This complexity can be stripped down into the fundamental building blocks of visual communication, e.g. shapes, colours, marks, lines, textures, etc. The individual marks are merely marks, but composed through composition, technique, texture, etc. A simple mark can contribute to deeper meaning. Krippendorff's qualitative framing of the audience's interpretation as felt or intuitive is crucial here. What you creators create is a tangible thing, whether it is a printed or digital design or illustration. How your audience understands what you are visually communicating is subconscious, perceptual, qualitative, and even emotional. Your ideation needs to accommodate a qualitative audience. From a pragmatic perspective, your aesthetic is not passive. The very nature of the visual language you select to build the aesthetic has multiple visual components. Each visual component has the potential, however weak, to be meaning-bearing to the audience. If you use the colour green, say, in your visual language because, using the old cliche, your client likes it, this can be the difference between successful visual communication or a miscommunication failure. Green is green, but even a colour can accrue social cultural meaning to it. Let us say your client is eco-friendly. The colour green has one social cultural contextual meaning for ecological or environmental concerns. If your client is a massive polluter, then the use of green will be challenged as greenwashing. Green is just a colour. Green is contextually and semiotically meaning-bearing. Used in the wrong audience context, any simple element in your visual language could divert audience intuition to something else you do not intend them to consider. Let me refer to this as the, well, that looks like this enigma that designers and illustrators straddle every day. What you visualize in your aesthetic using your chosen visual language clearly only visually communicates that denotative. How can the audience see that as a proxy for this connotative? In this season, we have unpacked how audience lifeworlds inform how the audience will interpret new things. When you ideate, you are mindfully seeking ways to visually communicate the concept for audience intuition. The visual elements you use in your visual language are, in plain sight, already suggesting meaning to your audience. But is it what you intend? We have all seen the optical illusions, a picture of a vase, or is it two faces? Or a rabbit? Or is it a duck? Yes? Well, I'm not talking about those intentional illusions when I used the, well, that looks like this enigma. What I am referring to is the difference between visually communicating and miscommunicating. That is a semiotic fine line between the representation of and the interpretation of the intended concept. This is not a criticism of your creative abilities in any way, but rather it's drawing your attention to how you represent the client's concept to your target audience, and how your target audience interprets what you represent. Your designs and illustrations are always clearly visible, aesthetically there in plain sight for everyone to enjoy and appreciate your talent. A brochure, a poster, a piece of packaging, etc. are tangible artifacts the audience can see, touch and interact with. To the audience, a brochure is clearly a brochure, etc. Obviously, these are just formats, and the visual communication lies within the designs and illustrations in any artifact. We are concerned with what some of you may refer to as a visual tone of voice or connotative meaning. Well, if you want to read more about this, then check out the Semiosis 101 semiotic resource on Ghost. Link is below in the description. I keep returning to branding for examples to explain this. How does Coca-Cola ensure you do not confuse its brand of cola with Pepsi? Yes, obviously in how the brand's designs are different to each other's. Duh, but think about this. You see the iconic red and white of Coca-Cola, or iconic the red, the white, black and blue of Pepsi. Both brands iconically use red and white, but you as shoppers learn the difference to differentiate buying cola by one brand from the other brand's cola. Notice I use the term iconic not as a synonym for classic, but in its actual semiotic usage for iconic representation. This is the weakest semiotic level of meaning-bearing representation in semiosis, using qualities such as colour, red and white, and shapes, the white swirl of the lettering and ribbon. These colour combinations and swirly ribbons in this branding context help visually communicate Coca-Cola's brand. Red, white and swirls in another context could visually communicate Wall's ice cream or Santander Bank or someone's favourite type of lollipop. In one context, the iconic representation you employ in your visual language will ensure the audience knows it means cola, because the audience socially culturally have learned that the associations mean cola when they see it. But when they see the same visual elements in an unfamiliar context, it can skew the audience's interpretations. By being mindful of this iconic representation contextual connection to your audience, you can semiotically ensure your audience are facilitated to the context you need them to be in. If you want them to enjoy a lovely lollipop, you don't want them thinking what they will taste will be cola and made by a famous brand. Obviously, this is a flippant example. I use it to make you realise that the familiarities evoked in the mind of the audience is iconic representation. Although iconic representation is at the simplest level of semiosis, it is firmly nested within the two higher levels. Iconic representation semiotically mediates the audience from familiar qualities to existent things. At the highest semiotic power of representation, existent things are generally agreed by the audience to be, in this visual context, proxy for the intended concept. Intuitively, your target audience's perception of what they see is partly dependent on their previous experiences, reference points, and expectations. They bring these when interpreting what you represent with your visual language. In the next episode, we begin to consolidate all the semiosis theory into practice. So remember to subscribe to be notified when this episode is published, or become a Semiosis 101 producer on Patreon and watch all future episodes months ahead of YouTube. See you all again for the next Semiosis 101 episode. Semiosis 101 is unique in helping illustrators and designers to semiotically enhance your visual communication skills, one designer-centric semiotic video at a time. Remember to hit subscribe to be notified when the next episode hits.